I'm live. I'm continuing reading Many Lifetimes. I'm in chapter 7. This is a book which is a collaboration between Joan Marshall Grants and Kelsey. They were married. She passed away in 1989. This is chapter 7, The Age of Perception. It's about their treatment methods, their hypnosis, and here is Joan recounting an episode she had with a patient, and I continue this here. If it were recognized that the artistic sensibilities of infants have already been cultivated during many earlier lifetimes, parents would take the trouble not to assault them with needless ugliness. The attribute of natural good taste is inborn in most people, but often deliberately discarded during early childhood because having an eye for beauty entails the ability also to recognize the forms and colors which evoke pain instead of pleasure. If a child's surroundings are too inharmonious, if he sees too many grotesques in his picture box, he may either become purblind or even go one step further in the wrong direction and develop a perverted taste for forms and colors, which his infant observation would instantly have recognized as being distorted. I'm not suggesting that the arrival of an infant involves the additional expense of employing an expert interior decorator, but I'm suggesting that he should be given something beautiful to look at, and that this object should be changed sufficiently often to hold his attention. A single flower comfortably within eye range is an excellent way of providing him with hours of entertainment, but do not cheat him with a plastic flower, however satisfying these may be to adults. Choose his picture books with care. Take the trouble to make a mobile of real things, leaves, shells, dried flowers, for him to watch. Put a branch of a pleasing shape where it can throw a pattern against the white wall, and do this when he is so young that the less discerning will say with invincible stupidity, but he's far too young to notice. Such people will probably give him hideous toys whose only appropriate destination is the dustbin. You will be amply rewarded for your efforts, even if you may suffer such momentary embarrassment as I suffered when Gillian, aged 3, paused on the threshold of a banqueting hall which had been monstrously redecorated by a Victorian grandmother, and exclaimed to her hostess, "Oh, who has been so cruel to this poor room?" It is important to keep in mind that before a baby has learned to talk, he will rely on telepathy, the method of communication common to all levels of experience except the three-dimensional. Suddenly, to find oneself among people who cannot understand what one is trying to convey is exceedingly frustrating, as anyone knows who has found himself among foreigners whose language he cannot speak. In such a situation, even adults are likely to shout, as though by sheer weight of this decibel the word barrier could be shattered, and it is the same source of frustration which often causes babies to scream. I recently came across a photograph of myself in the arms of an anxious father at the age of 10 months, and the sight of it brought a flashback to it being taken. The compass and box camera, on a tripod, was draped with a black velvet pall, the lens covered with a leather cap, which was whisked off for the exposure. The photographer frequently bobbed his head under the pall and then bobbed out again, a performance which I found entertaining. Then he pointed to the lens cover and said in the cozy coo, so repellent to children, "Watch for the little birdie to peep out. Tweet, tweet, can I hear it? Can't you hear it?" I was hotly indignant that he could imagine I was silly enough to believe there was a bird in the box. "Watch for the birdie, tweet, tweet," cajoled the photographer. I tried to tell him not to be so impertinent. How dared he insult my intelligence? How dared he think I was a baby? But I had no words, so I screamed with fury and then wept because I was so helpless. The final humiliation came when my father said, "How extraordinary that the child should be frightened by a camera." The loneliness of being unable to communicate through lack of language is one of the reasons why it is so reassuring to a baby to have an animal for companion, for animals are also free from the limitations of speech. But the animal should be carefully chosen for its character. It is basically jealous, bad-tempered, If it is basically jealous, bad-tempered, or aggressive, the baby will recognize these traits more clearly than the average adult. The small child's longing for an animal is dimly recognized in the custom of providing him with a stuffed toy. Perhaps a teddy bear is better than nothing, but while a real animal increases his capacity for identification with another living being, with whom he can have an ambivalent current of affection and understanding, the teddy bear is only an object on which he can project his fantasies, animate only in imagination. Imagination is a valuable asset, but only when it is used to supplement and correlate our actual experience. It can be exceedingly dangerous when used as a substitute for reality. I longed for an animal when I was a baby, but was considered too young to have one of my own. Later experience suggests that 9 months would have been the appropriate time, the age at which Gillian and a bull terrier puppy became mutually devoted companions. The first animal whom I had the opportunity of knowing were 2 young chimpanzees. Through the good fortune of having a nanny who was in love with a keeper who was training them. As we were then living in my grandmother's house on Primrose Hill, within easy pram push of the zoological gardens, we visited them twice daily, while Mother imagined I was being aired in Regent's Park. I was then about a year old, and it was exceedingly restful to have companions who also did not rely on speech. I had only to think I would like a grape, for one of the chimpanzees carefully... I read that last sentence again. I hope this was the only thing I missed. The first animal whom I had the opportunity of knowing were 2 young chimpanzees, through the good fortune of having a nanny who was in love with a keeper who was training them. As we were then living in my grandmother's house on Primrose Hill, within easy pram push of the zoological gardens, we visited them twice daily, while Mother imagined I was being aired in Regent's Park. I was then about a year old, and it was exceedingly restful to have companions who also did not rely on speech. I had only to think I would like a grape, for one of the chimpanzees carefully to select one from a box of sawdust and pop it into my mouth. Then they accepted me as easily as I accepted them. They carefully combed my hair with their fingers and I helped them to tie on their bibs, before the 3 of us sat amicably around the table and drank milk out of blue and white enamel mugs. Children are capable of relating cause and effect at a much earlier age than it is usually recognized. If their initiative is ignored and the praise or scolding, which they considered well-earned, fails to materialize, they may be extremely disquieted. Either their opinion of the grown-up still further deteriorates, for it is impossible to rely on people who can easily be duped, or else the child considers his efforts so inconspicuous that this may lead to a feeling of unreality, which, if too often repeated, can contribute to a neurosis. I was still about a year old when I heard my mother telling my half-sister Iris about the fire alarm which had been installed beside my parents' bed. She explained how it worked and then added that it must never be used unless the fire was too serious to be coped with by the fire extinguishers, but it could summon fire engines which would arrive within minutes. Even while I was listening to their conversation, I made up my mind to summon fire engines at the earliest opportunity. I would have to be alone in my parents' bedroom, be able to climb on the bed without assistance, discover how to break the glass cover, and then pull the brass knob. I understood perfectly well that this would be considered exceedingly naughty. At best, I should be scolded, and at worst have my knickers removed and be put on a high mark. I stop this here. It's amusing, but my battery drained, so there we go. Have a lovely Wednesday.